Just as a heads up, I might be a little bit low energy for this video. If you are not somebody who checks my community section, the community tab on my page to see when I post updates, then maybe you should, because I try to mention when I'm doing things and why, and things that people who want to know about, like my upload schedule and such, might want to know. Anyways, I made a post on that page about a week or so ago, letting people know that I had some sort of issue with my neck come up, and basically I spent 3 or 4 days barely being able to move my head and most of my upper body. As you can see, I am able to move at least a bit better now, so I do still have some pain, frankly speaking, but it is significantly better than it was previously, so that is that, and it is may still be impacting my recording, but I can't leave this channel unattended forever. That is how channels stop growing, that is how they die. And I also just want to continue watching and reacting to and recording some of these videos. So there is that, and it is also the case on the mental side of things that the election in the United States just happened, so yeah. I think that that's probably all I really need to say on that note, but that's also, gonna take its toll on not just myself, but possibly a lot of creators that you may be watching. So if somebody seems a bit gloomy, most creators don't like to talk about politics on their channels, whether they are YouTubers or Twitch streamers or whatever. But if somebody seems a bit down, then maybe consider that that might be part of why. But anyways, on to the actual show, on to the actual, content, so to speak, of the channel, the topics of these videos. Before we get into this episode, there is actually something that I want to say about this show. So this is something that I've actually been thinking about, and I've made like a little bit of mention of it, I think, a couple times in the past, and at least like to an extent. And sorry, before we get into this episode, some of the stuff that happened last episode kind of furthered some of the things that I was thinking, and I just want to get those thoughts that I am referring to at this moment out there before we go any further with this story. Obviously, let me just say in advance that if I am accurate with what I'm about to say, or even if I am inaccurate with what I'm about to say, do not confirm or deny that in the comments. I do, of course, like getting comments. Reminder to like, comment, and subscribe. But I do very much dislike spoilers. So don't let me know if I'm right or wrong. I just wanted to, again, just kind of say this for the sake of saying it. So yeah, maybe people will enjoy hearing it. uh, Frieren has kind of, I have commented multiple times to this point, like about power levels, in the sense of like Frieren has shown herself to be an incredibly powerful mage, right? And we know that she's lived for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that's like a big part of why she's gotten to be as powerful as she is, right? And I have sort of proposed the idea, in a sense, previously, that I don't necessarily think that that the Frieren we're seeing right now is significantly stronger than the Frieren who was part of the Heroes Party that defeated the Demon King, right? I don't think that there's like a huge difference between those two Frierens in terms of power level, necessarily. I could be entirely wrong about that, but that's not the point of what I'm getting at. So, the point of what I'm getting at is I think that it is possible, and again, I think I've said this before, I think it is possible that when they finally made their way to the Demon King's lair, his castle, I think it's entirely possible that Frieren basically just one-shot the fucking guy. And the reason that I'm bringing this up right now is to add a new dimension to this theory. Theory is a strong word to be using here, but you get what I'm saying. I want to add a new dimension to this and say that what we saw from Frieren last episode specifically, the way that she was talking about like thinking that things were too late and having regrets, and just like the way that she was basically seeing herself in Sane, not Sane, what is that? No, Sign is how you pronounce his name, I think. That's at least how the characters pronounce it. The way that she was seeing herself in Sign, and not liking what she was seeing, I am wondering if, and I don't know that I've said this part of my thought process before. I'm wondering if there is a sort of regret from Frieren where if she is so powerful that she did have an easy time dispatching of the Demon King, um, I wonder if there's a regret in the sense of like, what if she'd gone sooner? What if she didn't wait for Himmelda and his party to show up and recruit her? What if she had just gone sooner? Like, would she have been able to handle the journey and defeat and like, you know, and defeating this creature that had been a major blight on civilization for such a long time? Would she have been able to do that, 100, 200 years sooner? And if she had, how much, how many people would that have saved? How many people would have been spared suffering and or death if his reign had come to an end all the sooner, right? And so I don't know. There have been things about her behaviors and things that have been like said and hinted at prior to last episode that was making me wonder these things. But then seeing last episode, and then especially upon rewatching last episode, seeing some of the ways that, again, she kind of seemed to be reflecting on who Sign was as a person, and the similarities between who he was and where he is currently in his life versus who she was before she met Himmel the Hero and where she was in her life at that point in time. I'm just like I'm feeling like there are things from last episode that lend slightly more credence to this thought process. And so I wanted to kind of put this out there. Again, I think I've said before that like I'm not someone who does these videos and talks a lot about these episodes of things that I'm watching because like I want to be right necessarily. Um, I know that there are some React creators who like they spout a bunch of nonsense basically just so that if one of the things they happen to say ends up coming true in some capacity, they can be like, "Oh, I called it." Like that's not really something that's like a primary motivating factor for me when I watch these and react to these and talk about these things. But I do still like sharing my thoughts, and I hope that people find them interesting for whatever reason. So, with that being said, I think we can go ahead and actually get into this next episode, shall we? All right, let's get into this first episode where Cyan is an actual member of our party, I guess. Episode 14 of Frieren, starting in 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, 29 years after the death of Himmel the Hero. He's so much taller than them. Need to make my captions bigger. Caption size, for some reason, changes from video to video sometimes. So it does audio. Did he just ask her on a shopping date? Oh, wow. That was a really nice way to show passing of time, I think. There's like, obviously, that's like one of the big things about this show, right? That's one of the like big themes is like showing through Frieren's long life, it shows us the extent to which like the passage of time does change things. And I don't know, that was a very like nail on the head, like very obvious demonstration of how that works. But I don't know, I really liked that. I really liked the interspersing of the present with the past in her flashback there, going from the ringing bell straight into the like the regular clock face there. That was very simple, but sometimes things don't have to be like overly subtle or overly in your face. Sometimes you can just have like a very straightforward like, hey, here's this thing we're trying to show. It doesn't make it necessarily less effective, right? uh, and as we're finishing up with the opening here, I mentioned it jokingly as part of my intro at one point, but again, remember to like the video, leave a comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Also, I mentioned my community posts earlier. I put a poll up a couple of weeks ago for the next series to watch after I finish Dungeon Meshi, Privilege of the Young. Interesting. So if you haven't voted in that yet, you can do that as well. Oh, why are these two fighting already? I'm going back. Wow, big fight. What is going on here? I like the way he's like stamping away like a child. Are the lovebirds fighting? Okay. Settle down. I mean, didn't like, her pout. Do not smoke in my room. I will decapitate you. Knees? Bro, she's kicking you like close to the ankle. Maybe your shins are gonna be sore, but okay. I mean, like, I don't know. Hmm. I mean, I'm curious to see how this plays out because as he just like, pulled up his cuff to remind the audience, like, we've seen another birthday episode previously. I think it was only like 2 or 3 episodes ago too. So yeah, I'm curious to see how this plays out. Ooh, yeah. Uh, she really doesn't like this guy, huh? I'm gonna be honest. I don't think she knows how to interact with people, generally speaking. And hmm, bro, how many times? People won't know how you feel unless you tell them. There are folks who I would like to like smack them in a face with a sign that says that. But the thing that I was laughing about a minute ago that interrupted my what I was saying was how many times in the course of that conversation did Sign call Stark an idiot? I feel like he called him dumb like 3 different times and arguably 3 different ways. There we go. I don't think you needed to add that part there, bud. Don't ruin the moment. I know that like Sign is he had his comment of what is she doing? Oh my word. What is what is Oh my word. Interesting. So it's three kids. Not wrong. Ah, you know him actually. She is such a Oh my god. As he They're all children. She says as he's nearing his deathbed. I honestly don't think that's true. I know that like that's a very common thing that like everyone believes. I actually don't think that's true. I don't think that people just naturally mature as they age. I think that it is easy to mature as you age, but I think that a lot of people reject the kind of experiences and considerations that actually cause them to gain maturation as they age. I don't know. Wow. Oh, didn't they? Probably part of the point of this conversation and why they're showing this to us, but didn't they have a sort of flipped conversation in a previous flashback from like much earlier in their lives? I'm pretty sure it was in the episode with Kraft the Monk, right? Where he said that he would listen to her and praise her, and she was like, "No, I've already had someone do that," and they showed us the flashback where Heither said that he would praise her for her actions. So yeah. Ooh. Okay. It was. I think there was a lot to like about that half of the episode. I didn't make all the comments that I wanted to, but I'll try to revisit some of those things that I was thinking at the end. Huh? I think this was what we saw in the last birthday episode, actually. Wow. Oh, the ring! Oh, that hurt. Uh, the poor horse. We're in one right now. He's so simple. Really? That is interesting. Who was that? Uh, okay, interesting. I do like the I do generally like the occasional little magic lessons we get that explain how various aspects of the system work. You can't just say that. That's odd. What is up with Eisen? That's the second time in a row we had this exact same conversation last episode when Stark got poisoned. They talked about Eisen taking like multiple poison arrows and like not caring, right? Huh. Oh, geez. Ooh, the animation. Well, in that case, let's murder it first and figure out what to do later. Oh, is she just gonna improv this shit? Let's go. They're all dead. Second half of the anime is gonna be different characters. Um, looks like it kind of worked. You call that a plan? You know, I'm kind of with him. True. Wait, are we actually just fixing the carriage? Oh my word. They're also handy. I don't think the fabric is the highest priority. Not the ring! Does she have locate object? Is that a spell that she knows? Wait. Oh? Interesting. Ah. I was gonna say he was probably just looking at her the whole time trying to figure out. Can he? Oh my word. Oh. Ah! Oops. I didn't know! Oh, rip. Did you say something? No, no, ma'am. No, she looks like she likes it. I feel like obviously she like just got it, right? But I feel like the couple times that we've seen her like looking at it already and like the way that she like acts with it on her wrist, the word that comes to my mind, I feel like she's protective of it, honestly, which obviously shows that she cares about it a lot. Also, by the way, this so you say that Frieren has a ring with this same design that she got from Himmel. You don't say. I don't know. I hope that like people are meant to be picking up on this like very obvious the very what are on the on these like repeat hints of the affections between these two. Again, I think that it's still arguable whether it's one-sided or whether they both had some sort of romantic affection for the other. But like, I feel like we've gotten plenty by this point, plenty of instances of Himmel very clearly liking Frieren, right? So I hope that it's not. I hope that it's not meant to be like a surprise. When I assume they're going to like outright reveal it at some point. I hope that it's like not meant to be a surprise. I don't believe her. I definitely don't believe her. She learns the locate object spell this episode. Let's go! I called it. uh, Obviously, that was a bit of a joke, referring to my little monologue from the beginning of the video. The scene has such unnecessary polish. Oh, did she pick it out? Yeah, so he knows. So he knew, she didn't at the time. That tracks. But also, obviously, one of the things it's trying to show us is that they did the picking out gifts for each other thing that Fern and Stark did that Sign talked about earlier. Yeah, buddy? God, what a pretty shot. Such pretty. This is such a pretty scene. They found it. Yay! Is she going to start wearing it? How could you say that? Okay, I really liked that episode. Yeah, I really like that episode. I feel like a lot of the sort of a lot of the sort of like meaning and symbolism from this episode is relatively straightforward, I think. Like, so so one of the things that I wanted to say earlier was that Cyan obviously keeps referring to like Fern and Stark as like lovebirds and similar, and like talking about them in a romantic context, even though we haven't necessarily seen anything like that from them. And I just want to say that just personally as a viewer, like I honestly don't really care if these two end up getting together in a romantic capacity or not. Um, like there are times in media where I will like, ship characters. But in this particular series with these particular characters, I'm entirely okay with them being a couple or not being a couple. I just think that the the relationships between the relation Jesus. I just think that the relationships between these characters are already good enough that you don't necessarily need to add a romantic flavor to any of them. And obviously in this case, we're talking in particularly about the relationship between Fern and Stark. Like, I think that you can continue to flesh out what we've seen and what we've built of their characters and of their relationship with each other without necessarily making it romantic. However, I also don't think that it will automatically like ruin their relationship by any means if they do decide to go that direction. So that was just one thing that I wanted to say is that like I think that you are very much being led to believe that these two are going to end up together. Um, but I don't think that it's necessary, and I don't really have a preference as to whether they do or don't. So that was one of the things from earlier in the episode that I wanted to mention. And then, but again, like then otherwise though, like the stuff with like the this episode being like a birth or specifically the first half of the episode being a birthday episode for Fern when we've already had a birthday episode for Stark, and just like seeing the different ways that the different characters reacted and responding to how gifts were or were not initially given, and then having the kind of again the little the twist of like not necessarily a twist, but like the the aspect of like the characters end up picking out gifts for each other, and the way that I don't remember what did Sign say exactly. Oh, here it is. Actually, I found it. Go me. Did you choose one with him? How did you know? Normally, no one does. Normally, no one declines when someone offers to buy them whatever they want. You must consider an important memory. So yeah, just this little thing of like, and I also before I continue with like the things that happened this episode, I do want to comment very quickly that like there are some things for talking about Sign as a character, right? And the way that he is, again, he's very new to the show, very new to our party, very new to our group dynamic. But so far, I have liked what I've seen from him. There have been a few times where I'm like, okay, I feel like they are. There have been a few times where like where he had lines where I was like, okay, I feel like they're leaning a bit too much on this like silly, meaningless aspect of his character in order to like just give him something to say here. But otherwise, for the most part, I feel like he has been a character, at least in this episode, that has shown himself to be fairly observational and like actually has like a pretty decent understanding of people and relationships, such that I feel like the sort of advice that he's giving isn't like I don't think the advice he's giving is meant to be like, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about, haha. I think it is actually meant to be like, oh, this is somebody who, like, he is a bit older. He does have a bit of life experience, and he is, frankly speaking, better with people than Frieren is, at least naturally. Obviously, we have seen over the course of the show, Frieren has gotten to be like more of a people person, but naturally, she was very much not, right? And I think that what we're seeing with Sign is that he is a bit more, not necessarily like an amazing people person. I don't think we can say that, at least not after just this episode. But he's definitely, I think, at least a bit more of a natural people person. And again, he's just had some very good observations about the way that people behave and the way that they respond to certain things. And so, and then what was the hold up? It was right here, right? Yeah, and the line, of course, that I really liked in the moment, even initially after seeing it during the reaction, was people won't know how you feel unless you tell them. One thing I do want to say though, that I think is funny about that is that so there's actually a couple things that are funny about that. So one, and both of them actually can be tied back to last episode. So last episode, we saw that him and his brother got into a bit of a fight where his brother actually slapped him very much because they didn't know what the other was thinking or feeling about, about each of their respective decisions to remain in the village as priests, right? And I commented last episode because of that scene. I commented how it feels like a lot of the time in this show, one of the issues that I have with some of the dialogue and some of the communications and interactions is that it feels like people are just bad at communicating. And so I feel like this line of people won't know how you feel unless you tell them is really funny because one, I think we are in a sense we might be meant to be interpreting this as like, oh, he learned this the hard way of like, if he had taken his own advice at this point previously with his brother, then they might have had a better understanding with each other sooner without the need for his brother to have slapped him. And then it's also funny just because, like, again, I feel like when I made the joke during the reaction about how I feel like I could, slap people with this with this piece of information, with this piece of knowledge. I was talking about people in real life, frankly speaking, but I also feel like this is relevant to a number of characters that we have seen throughout the show at various points in time. So yeah, that was just a really, really nice line, really enjoyable line. And then again, so with those things being said, now getting back to like again things that actually happened. So we have like the birthday stuff between Fern and Stark. We have the choosing of gifts and the way that people feel about that. We have the potentially like budding relationship between those two, but also not necessarily. And the meaning behind the gifts, as well as what that may or may not potentially mean for their possibly budding relationship. And then yeah, again, I feel like a lot of the stuff was relatively straightforward. While there are a lot of things in this show that are like intentionally very subtle, this was an episode that I feel like a lot of stuff was pretty straightforward. And again, so like looking at like, and then like you can see as much as Fern calls Stark an idiot, like in general, but also just like even just in this episode itself, and the way that like Stark seems to have trouble dealing with Fern, you do see like the very obvious care in the extent to which they do show like in the extent to which they struggle with these interactions, right? I think the fact that they do have such a hard time with this whole notion and aspect of gift giving in this episode kind of shows how much they care. And one of the things I'm looking at right now on the screen, and something that I didn't comment on, but I noticed multiple times in the first half of the episode, was like the way that the show demonstrated this to the audience was at multiple points you see both Fern and Stark like gripping their fists tightly in kind of like frustration and just like a bit of like confusion of like not knowing what to say and not knowing what to do. And it does kind of come back to this idea that I just talked about from what Sane said of like people won't know how you feel, people won't know what you're thinking unless you tell them. And we get a little bit more of that communication between these two as a result. And so I just yeah, and so like I said, it's not necessarily that I think I'm like revealing some deep insights by talking about this stuff with regards to what happened in this episode, because I think a lot of this stuff was pretty immediately observable. Um, but I'm talking about it in the sense of like recognizing and acknowledging that like I think that this stuff is really important for proper and healthy relationships and communication in relationships. And I also just think that it's like really cool stuff to be putting in the show, and that I like seeing dealt with, I guess you could say. And then what was the other thing, really briefly? There was a visual thing I wanted to make note of, but there was a conversation that I also didn't want to interrupt. So when Frieren and Sign are on the roof here, there's him talking about how you understand things better when you're older, start avoiding okay, yeah. Those arguments are the privilege of the young. And then that can't have been easy for you, Frieren. And then at this moment in the conversation, and when he says like looking after two kids sounds tough, at this moment, her hair was over her left shoulder, and she tucks it back and it reveals her earring. And I don't necessarily know, honestly, what exactly that symbolism is supposed to be, but I think that there is something about that visual that is supposed to be, again, visually representative of like of her age and of what he's talking about, where like because of her being older, she's like seen these sorts of things. Because again, as we've kind of as I've recognized before, like the design of her earrings is based on her master's necklace, right? Is based on I think her master had had those earrings as well, that they were slightly different, right? But I think that was meant to be, I don't know. I think that was supposed to be like a reminder of like how she shares this connection with her master, and how that is also like in a sense a reminder of, again, just how old she is, because again her master was, this was hundreds of years ago. So I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I do think that there's, I'm even if I'm not necessarily reading too much into it, I might not be reading into it in like 100% the intended direction per se. But yeah, I don't know. I did feel like there was something to that little bit of blocking in that scene. So I don't know. I just wanted to make mention of that. But then of course I was distracted because it then went quickly from that into levity, where Sign is like, "Oh, never mind. She's actually just another child. As this is a group of children." And then before I could recover from laughing about that, we have Frieren sliding down the roof like a child. So that was just this is also, again, I know that I think I've mentioned this a couple of times. I know that this show isn't like, I know that comedy isn't like what this show is known for and like the main reason why people watch it, but there are times where this show is pretty funny, and those are honestly some of the times that I think that I enjoy the show the most, is when it's being funny and silly, which is surprising. uh, yeah, I think that there's probably not really too much more for me to harp on for this episode, because I think that a lot of these stuff that happens in the second episode, it's like it's very much part of like a through line, right? The stuff with, again, all the stuff that I've mentioned multiple times at this point that I think is like, relevant and important from the first half of the episode, that carries a very direct through line to the second half of this episode. Like this episode, I think, well, so Frieren obviously, like in a lot of the episodes, most of the episodes, it's very much like part A, part B. Like it's very much two distinct sort of stories and plots in the same episode. other than like that one arc with the demons. Pretty much every episode has been like that. However, this episode is like the most connected of all the episodes I think that we've really seen so far. Where the first half of the episode and the second half of the episode are still very different, but the things that they're talking about were like exactly the same. They were like they were very much meant to be connected and related to each other, and so that was just very nice to see because obviously I've had my complaints over the course of the show thus far with some of the ways that things are paced or structured in the story. And so seeing the way that this episode played out just felt really good to watch, I guess. And yeah, I think that the only other thing that I really want to mention is, I talked about so when we got the when we got the when we went from talking about the jewelry and birthday stuff from Fern and Stark to then talking about it with Frieren and Himmel, I eventually ended up talking about like, the obvious romantic stuff between the two, and that was before we got the like what essentially looked like a proposal in the flashback. Um and so I do just want to briefly also mention last episode that there was another one of those hints that I don't think I talked about in terms of showing the affection between them, or at the very least from Himmel towards Frieren, which was that in the and also speaking of those comedic scenes, my favorite scene from the last episode was the blowing the kiss scene where Sign was unaffected by Frieren blowing the kiss, but Stark and Fern were, and more so Frieren commented on how it greatly affected him. It like devastated him, and like that was very obviously I think meant to show that like it had an effect. It had such a dramatic effect on Himmel because again, as we've seen with the previous hints at several points throughout the series, he probably had a thing for Frieren, and again we keep building on that with this episode, and so I don't really again I'm just a little unsure where that's headed. Like I'm wondering if like the point of all of this is building us up to like I guess what I want to say here is I wonder what most of the audience was thinking at this point in time, right? I think that that's kind of what I'm getting at is it's not that I'm unsure of what the show is trying to tell me. I think it's more so I'm curious what the general kind of perception was amongst the like viewing community as they were watching this. What was the idea that like, oh, Frieren and Himmel were together, and I or is the idea that we're being led to believe that those two were together, and then the reveal is going to be, oh, Frieren actually rejected him. Like, is that going to be what happens? I'm unsure. I'm unsure if that's kind of where we're going with this, or if it is the case that like the audience was like, oh, Frieren has told us that elves don't care about romance or sex, so we're supposed to believe that she does reject him, but they actually did have some sort of romantic connection and it was reciprocated. I don't know. I guess that is yeah, I'm curious what the community perception was at the time. I guess if for people who obviously that there I have multiple people who watch this show and do comment on the show. If you can say what people were thinking, if you can give me like an idea of what the kind of community consensus was at sort of this point in time, more or less, without going into like actual spoilers of things that do actually end up happening, then feel free to let me know that in the comments. I would be curious to hear one way or the other. But I think that is probably it. I talked way longer than I expected to about this because, again, I feel like a lot of this stuff was not necessarily needing a great analysis. So I hope that the last 20, 30 minutes hasn't felt like I've just been rambling and repeating myself over and over. Oops. Anyways, I guess that's going to be it. Remember to like the video, leave a comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out the stuff on the channel if you're so inclined to do so. Again, we are potentially finishing up Dungeon Meshi in the near future. While I'm pretty sure I know what the next show is going to be based on the poll that I posted a few weeks ago. If you have not voted in that already, then go ahead and go do that, because even if your vote doesn't influence what I do end up watching after finishing Dungeon Meshi, if I am able to continue making these videos on this channel, then it will influence the options in the next poll that I make, most likely for after I finish this show, if that all made sense, if I put my words in the right order there. So yeah, go check that out. If you want to check out my other channel, but if you want to just keep watching these watch-along versions of videos that I post over here, that's entirely fine too, and I do appreciate it. So until I see you in the next one, take care. Bye-bye.